Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4. It says we are live. I think we are live. I think we should be live. If everything is going well, let me know, everybody, if you can hear us, if you can hear the sounds. If we look okay. I believe we do look okay. We naturally are supposed to look okay, I hope. Unless, I don't know.
Ridwan's all well groomed and everything. I've been growing like, I told Ridwan, I've been growing like a terrorist beard.
Because we can't go out.
Social distancing thing happened, yeah.
Because of lockdown and social distancing, there's no fault. You can completely act like the most caveman version of us that we can possibly be. So you have an excuse for that. I do too. Hi everybody, welcome. This is the Apostate Prophets. I'm here today with my dear friend Sham Sharma. We want to talk about India issues, what's going on in India currently, the whole Citizenship Amendment Act, protests during the whole coronavirus outbreak, stuff that has been on the news for quite a while. I haven't talked about India for a while because of just personal issues. I didn't want to. I made a video about India and then everything kind of got into a little bit of a shit show, and then I thought this is too much for me, so I stopped talking about it.
Yeah. But well, welcome to any discussion about India.
but I thought I should talk about this topic now. Look into it, and who's best to talk about this than my dear friend? How are you? How are you doing?
I'm doing well, man. Thanks for having me on.
I'm really pleased to have you on. It's been quite overdue. I've been on your channel for like twice or so, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah. That was nice. So, how's everything going?
It's going good. Just social distancing the hell out of this thing, trying to stay home as much as I can. I've been playing board games with my cat and beating the shit out of her, so it's
good. Nice. Wonderful. Social distancing is good. This is a public service announcement. Everyone should be staying at home for now. Just do what experts say. Stay at home, don't go into crowds, don't act like you're a tough guy and nothing will happen to you. It's not about you, it's about others. You might be very well safe from death or serious damage or whatever.
Yeah, and a little public service announcement from India. If you're really worried about toilet paper, just learn to wash it, man. If you can't find toilet paper anywhere, just wash it.
Awesome. Okay. So what has been going on in India? What have I missed? There's been this whole Citizenship Amendment Act. Yep. You've talked about it quite a lot. Do you want to summarize that for me and for others? What is all that about?
There's two things, actually. The first thing, which I'll tell you about, and then the other thing is the National Register of Citizens, or the NRC as it is called. So ostensibly the protests are happening over both of those issues. But the protest pretty much started as soon as the CAA, the Citizenship Amendment Act, was announced. And what the Citizenship Amendment Act essentially does is that it fast tracks the citizenship process for refugees, Hindu, Buddhist, Sikh, Jain, Christian, and Parsi refugees, so Zoroastrian refugees that are already living in India, that have already found refuge in India. It fast tracks the citizenship process for them from 11 years to 6 years. So they can get, their citizenship faster, and they will not be prosecuted for living in India illegally, essentially, because the government has deemed that these communities are facing extenuating circumstances in their home countries of Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Afghanistan. Is that if these communities and these people who have sought shelter in India, if these communities stay in these countries, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Afghanistan, that they face an existential threat, which is a fact. So the government decided that if anybody entered these communities entered India before 31st December 2014, then their citizenship process will be fast-tracked. So that's essentially the Citizenship Amendment Act in a nutshell. And now the protests are obviously about that this is Islamophobic and it is discriminating against Muslims and so on and so forth. But for Muslims, there is still a pathway to come to India. The original immigration laws that existed are still existing. So if a Muslim is feeling like they're unsafe in these three countries, they can still apply to get asylum into India through the originally existing asylum laws. And they can still apply for citizenship in India. In fact, a Pakistani singer called Adnan Sami has recently been granted Indian citizenship by the Indian government. So those laws are still working just fine. These laws have been created to expressly help communities which are facing an existential threat in these three countries. Like in Pakistan, obviously the situation of these communities is very dire. Everybody knows the case of Asia Bibi, who was a Christian woman. Then there's the case of the kidnapping, disappearance, and forced conversions of Hindu women in the Sindh province of Pakistan, where they've been kidnapped. Young girls, young underage girls are being kidnapped in Sindh province, and they're being forcibly converted to Islam, and they're being married off to Muslim men, much older Muslim men in many cases. And in Peshawar, which is another part of in Western Pakistan, you have this ethnic cleansing of the Sikhs going on, where they're being routinely targeted and murdered over bullshit blasphemy charges. So clearly they're facing these existential crises in these countries, and so the Indian government decided to reach out a hand and help them out, and that's where the protests have been happening.
Okay, thank you so much. So what I understand is that in India, just like in many other, just like in many Western liberal countries, I just corrected the other that I said there. Just like in Western liberal countries, there is a system where you can, if you are persecuted, if you fear persecution in a different land, you can flee to India and apply for asylum in India, and India can then, looking at the circumstances, looking at how you are persecuted, how you are at risk, decide whether you will be accepted into the country as an asylum seeker or not, and later you can also get citizenship through that. As I understand, this whole Citizenship Amendment Act doesn't change anything about any of that at all. It is merely about if individuals come from Afghanistan, Pakistan, or Bangladesh, and they are Hindus, Buddhists, Sikhs, Jains, and Christians, Parsis, and all the disadvantaged minorities. And if they are already in India, and if they came before 2014, right, then they have a quicker way to become Indian citizens, because we see that there is a thing going on, that they are persecuted in those specific countries, and Muslims are obviously not, because those are Muslim countries. That's what this is about. So it doesn't change anything about the chances of Muslims becoming citizens, the Muslims becoming asylum seekers.
Yes.
It
doesn't affect Indian, and it doesn't affect, the people are afraid that a lot of misinformation has been spread that it affects Indian Muslims in some way. So the Citizenship Amendment Act does not affect Indian citizens in any way. It only affects people that are foreigners, native citizens of Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Bangladesh that are trying to, seek asylum in India, that have sought asylum in India, are trying to become citizens of India. Those are the only people that it affects.
Okay. Well, I saw that some people have. I mean, I saw that there are major concerns. Not some people, but that there are major concerns that this is a ruling that, although it doesn't directly discriminate against Muslims,
right?
It is a law based on a religious background. So it is a law where, or an amendment where people of certain religious backgrounds can have a certain advantage. So some people have, or major voices have apparently voiced that this might be the beginning of laws and amendments based on religion, which might lead to ignoring secularism and equality, and enacting laws that could discriminate against religious groups, most importantly against Muslims here.
Well, the main issue here is that this law would not be required if these particular communities were not being discriminated against based on religion. Mm-hmm. This law has only been created because these communities are specifically being targeted because of their religious orientation. if these communities were not being targeted in these three Islamic countries for their religious orientation, then you don't need this law. So, I find it hard to point fingers at India for protecting these minorities or protecting these communities when the whole issue has arisen because these communities are being targeted for their religious orientation.
Okay, there is another thing that I've seen, which
Sure.
is that while it is, I'm just playing a devil's advocate.
Sure. No, I get it.
Don't blame me. I'm trying to understand the situation.
Right.
It is good that India stands up for persecuted minorities in neighboring countries, but we have received news like Human Rights Watch, for example, or other sources that are normally known to be kind of much more objective compared to all the big ones,
Right.
have pointed out that there is major discrimination going on against Muslims in Myanmar, for example, which is a country that is also neighboring India. So I've seen questions of if India cares about welcoming persecuted minorities from neighboring countries, then why didn't they include Sri Lanka or Myanmar, for example, or Nepal, for example, where people face persecution or issues too, or where Muslims in Myanmar, for example, have faced major persecution according to many sources.
Right, and that's a good question. And you'll notice the same people making that argument will also notice that the Citizenship Amendment Act does not include the Hindus of Sri Lanka, because India does not consider the situation in Sri Lanka currently to be an emergency for Hindus. Like it used to be. It was the case before, but it is not anymore. The Sri Lankan government is trying to adopt policies which is trying to sort of reduce the animosity between the Sinhala people and the Hindu people of Sri Lanka. So they've not been included in the Citizenship Amendment Act. And it is only these three countries that have been affected in some measure by partition. So the sort of parts of Afghanistan, then Pakistan and Bangladesh, all these countries not very long ago used to be India. So when this partition happened, it happened very abruptly. A lot of people died, and a lot of people could not get their affairs either sorted out in time, or they just chose to not leave their ancestral homes and move countries. And so it is these countries, it is people of this erstwhile India that used to be part of India and that used to be sort of part of the civilizational Indian culture that the Indian government is looking to help at the moment. Because I think it's completely fair for governments, and I think it's completely fair for countries to have a civilizational identity. Like the United States, for example, has this Lautenberg Amendment, right, that they ratify every year, where if you're like a persecuted Christian or a Jewish minority from erstwhile Soviet nations, you don't even have to prove that you're being discriminated against. You can just come to India and you'll get asylum there. So the United States has decided that we have this civilizational identity, and there are other countries in the world that have decided that they have this civilizational identity, and nobody points a finger at those people for having those civilizational identities. But and I think in that vein, I think India is also well within its rights to define its civilizational identity and to help people that it deems are being discriminated against within those civilizational identities. Because if you look at another analogy to the whole Rohingya issue is also the sort of issue when ISIS came into being in the Middle East, and you had a lot of these Muslim countries who were saying, well, go to Europe, and all these most big Muslim populations were going to Europe, and Europe was taking them in with open arms, at least in the beginning. At the same time that Europe was taking all of these people in, a lot of the Muslim countries were the ones that were turning these people away. They're like, well, just go north, don't worry about it. And so I think for the Rohingyas, at least they have somewhere to go. They have other countries that they can still apply to. This is the Indian government's thinking, at least here, that they have certain countries that they can apply for asylum to. There is, the ostensible ummah that they keep, talking about, that the ummah will take care of us. But for these minorities, for these communities in Southern Asia, they have nowhere to turn to. Nobody else will take them. And if they go to any of these other countries in that area, it'll be the same, they'll face the same problem. So India decided to prioritize helping them first.
Okay, so there is a good point here that many countries around the world actually have laws where you can based on claiming a certain heritage, a certain identity, a certain ethnic identity, or even religious identity, you can apply to become a resident or a citizen of a specific country. Even Spain, for example, has that for people who can prove that they are descendants of Sephardic Jews, for example. Right. You can then go and apply for citizenship in Spain. And many other countries have examples of that as well. So it is not really an isolated case. The only difference is that India offers a pathway for people who were who might not be inherently connected to India, but who are, for example, Christians in Afghanistan or Christians in Pakistan who are persecuted could find a home in India rather than just Hindus or Sikh or Jains, for example. One thing though is, when I was looking into it, there was one thing that I immediately thought of, which is, okay, to be very honest, I think it is good that India takes initiative and offers a way for persecuted minorities in these countries. And we all know how minorities are treated in Pakistan or in other countries. That India offers a chance for them to find a home in India and to call it their home and to become citizens, and that they don't just do it for Hindus, as we can see, but also even for Parsis and Christians. But one thing that I thought of is, what about the Ahmadi Muslims, for example? Like, Ahmadi Muslims are known to be extremely persecuted in Pakistan. It's like you cannot openly identify as an Ahmadi Muslim in Pakistan. And when you go to different Muslim countries, it's basically the same all around the Muslim world. Like, you are not accepted as a Muslim. You are seen as a heretic, beaten, persecuted, lynched. And so many Ahmadi Muslims would rather go to countries like India, for example, that are not Islamic, where they can freely practice their religion. So why did India not include those groups?
Look, that's a good point. And personally, I don't have a massive problem with Ahmadi Muslims being included in that list. However, I think in explaining, if I have to think about where the government may be coming from in not including Ahmadi Muslims, they may remember the actions of the Ahmadi Muslims during partition as well, because the Ahmadi community was at the forefront of the creation of a separate country of Pakistan. Whenever they presented the idea of a separate Pakistan to India, they said, don't look at me as an Ahmadi, don't look at me as a Shia. I am a Muslim. For you, for Indian, for the Kafir, I am a Muslim. So I cannot coexist with you. So I need a separate nation where I can live freely with my Islamic practices. And, the Ahmadi community, members of the Ahmadi community, were at the forefront of the creation of a separate state of Pakistan. And they insisted that they be known as Muslims and not as Ahmadis. And even during the Kashmir issue, when in 1947, 1948, the Pakistani army sent in the Afghan tribals to forcibly annex Kashmir, the Ahmadi community of Kashmir fought on the side of the Pakistanis. They fought on the side of the Pakistanis to, quote unquote, liberate Kashmir from Kuffar control. So, it is entirely possible that the government of India has not forgotten those actions, and they've thought, well, you insisted over and over again that you do not want to be seen as Ahmadi. You want to be seen as a Muslim in the eyes of the Kuffar. Okay, we'll let you have your wish. Having said that, again, I do not have a problem with, I think, people being included, the Ahmadi Muslims being included in the Citizenship Amendment list. And we also know that a lot of Ahmadis do not apply for asylum to India. They do not. They rather go to other countries. They do not apply for. There's not a large number of Ahmadis that are queuing up to apply for asylum in India. Most of these are Sikhs, Hindus, and the communities that are actually included in the Citizenship Amendment list. So yeah,
I think it would be a class act of India. I would think, despite the actions of the past, despite Ahmadis or other minority heretical Muslim groups that are not welcome in current Muslim countries, it would be a class act of India to say, hey, currently these people are being persecuted. So it is we as a compassionate, as a helpful and free country and free nation offer rights for these groups to be included in this act as well. I think that would be the best thing to do, if I can say that in my very humble opinion.
No, I agree with your opinion, and I would be completely open to it. I would be completely open to including Ahmadiyas as well. And like I said, there are already laws in place that would allow Ahmadi Muslims to gain asylum into India and to gain citizenship of India if they do choose to apply. So there are already laws in place, and I would be open to including Ahmadi Muslims in the CAA as well.
Yeah. I think it would be a wrong thing to do, to judge a current community by what happened 60 years ago, 70 years ago. When was that? Anyways,
Right.
About right. So no, it would be,
that's about correct.
Yeah. It would be. I think it would be incorrect to judge the current situation, the current community, by by actions of other people or older people back then. Since especially the people who are today and who are affected by this today couldn't know back then, or their ancestors couldn't know how the situation would eventually end up for them.
Right.
When the creation of these separate Muslim jurisdictions was being designed, for example. Right. I don't think they were aware that Ahmadis would be treated the way they are treated today in Pakistan. So I think that is indeed a problem. But other than that, I have to be very honest. When I looked at the whole emergence of this situation of the Citizenship Amendment Act and the protests in response to that, I thought it looked kind of it looks like something that Western nations wouldn't do.
Right.
But then again, why would you judge India exactly by what Western nations would or wouldn't do?
Right.
Just, even if we share some similar political systems and a similar basis for the country's legislations, for example, in India would in the end, you don't see that India is actively discriminating against people. It's not. Right. India is not persecuting specific people based on religious background, is not kicking people out, not rejecting people, not doing anything. All that India does is just giving people of a specific religious backgrounds, of almost all religious backgrounds, except Muslims in this case.
Right.
That could be misunderstood. I'm talking about those in the region. Obviously, it doesn't include all religions in the world, except Muslims. That would be kind of a gross thing. But it just gives people who are obviously persecuted in India's surroundings just an advantage that those people might need. And I would think that India has a right to do that, and that shouldn't be seen as something bad or interpreted as something bad.
Right.
I think, as I see it, much of the violent reactions, the fearful reactions, the protests come from being afraid of what this might mean for the future, or what India might do after this. Based on.
And I do think there is an important discussion to be had here as well, Ridwan, because let's come to the other part of this issue. So the first part is Citizenship Amendment Act, which I 100% completely back. I'm fully in support of it because these people need all the help that they can get. The second part of it is where I have my doubts and my problems. The second part of it is the National Register of Citizens, or the NRC. Now, the National Register of Citizens is essentially a massive exercise that the government of India has talked about, not yet implemented at all, not even come out with a plan for it yet, but they have spoken about implementing this practice where they're going to find out who exactly is a legal citizen of India and who is living in India illegally. And That is something that I have my doubts with, because, in a country like India, where you have a large poor population, where you have a large population that is not very well educated, for instance, they will have trouble with finding all of their papers. So if the government of India says, okay, you need all of these kinds of documents to prove that you're a legal citizen of India. Imagine a poor family that's just a daily wage laborer that is living, daily on a paycheck to paycheck basis. They might not have those kinds of documentation available. They're just a daily wage laborer. They just go to work, come home, provide home, food for that day, and they don't have that kind of documentation available. So they and their families might have been living in India for generations, but they just don't have the documentation to prove it. So if you're creating an exercise where you have a large number of these people who do not have these kinds of documents, and so they run the danger of being declared illegal despite living in India for generations. So that's a genuine danger here. So the current NRC system, it is only being applied right now in one state, and that is the state of Assam, because the state of Assam has traditionally seen a gigantic amount of illegal infiltration from Bangladesh. And so it led to a lot of insurgency. It led to a lot of terrorism and violence in that state. And finally, not the BJP government. A lot of people are, blame the BJP government, the current Hindu government, whatever you want to call it, for the NRC. But the NRC was not the BJP government's idea. It was the Congress government's idea, the so-called secular government's idea, where they signed an accord with the state of Assam called the Assam Accord, where they promised, this NRC in Assam, where they said that they're going to get rid of all the illegal immigration and all the illegal infiltration that is happening in the state of Assam and is threatening Assamese culture and Assamese way of life. So this has been promised by the Congress government, and this has been ordered by the Supreme Court of India. It has nothing to do with the BJP government, the current NRC that is being applied in Assam. So in Assam, you can make a very good case that, and in West Bengal, you can make a very good case that there's this crazy amount of infiltration happening from Bangladesh, which is seriously jeopardizing the culture of these two states. But that kind of infiltration is not necessarily happening in a lot of other states. So, the idea of implementing NRC nationally is not something that appeals to me, because the way NRC is implemented right now in Assam, it is focused on minimizing false positive, which means that by accident, you don't declare an illegal citizen an Indian. That's what it is focusing on. So if you focus on eliminating false positives, what you're doing is you're not focusing on false negatives, which mean what this NRC can sometimes do is it can take somebody who is an Indian citizen and declare them illegal, right? So if you do that for the entire country, you are running the risk of being in a situation where you take potentially millions of Indian citizens and declare them illegal simply because they do not have the requisite documentation. And that could be a serious problem. That is something that I have a genuine problem with.
So there is a thing here. I saw often people talking about NRC and CAA kind of interchangeably, but what seems to be happening here is that the Citizenship Amendment Act is something that is enacted where people of specific backgrounds, like Hindus, Buddhists, Jains, Sikhs, Christians, Parsis, and the others, can who are in India because they fled from Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Bangladesh, and they arrived before 2014, can have a quicker way to become Indian citizens. So they can prove that they came from there, they were persecuted, which means they can quickly attain Indian citizenship. The NRC, on the other hand, is something that is currently only regionally implemented, and that might be implemented in the coming future. I think. When is there a plan to that? Or?
There is no plan. The government has announced they don't have any plan of implementing it at the moment.
Okay, so it's something that people talk about that could be implemented, but which there is no plan about. But that basically means that the government could go around in the country and seek out illegal immigrants who have been living in the country without any proper cause and without any proper papers, and then do what with them? Deport them?
Yes, and see, so the current setup in Assam is what has been directed by the Supreme Court. Again, people like to always say that this is the BJP's idea, but this is not the BJP's idea. This has been directed by the Supreme Court of India. They have said that for the people that have come into Assam illegally, because that's the only place where NRC is right now, people that have come into Assam illegally, you put them in detention centers and you deport them. That is the current plan right now. And again, this also creates a huge human rights problem. If you take NRC and if you implement it on the entire country, are you just going to take millions of people who you find are undocumented? Are you going to just throw them in detention camps like what China is doing? That's just something I cannot get behind, and that's just something that a lot of people just cannot get behind. So
that seems something that people can legitimately feel very concerned about. I mean, when I think about it, that feels very dark. That feels very dark.
So the government talked about this plan, and they got a lot of blowback. They got a lot of blowback from, obviously, the sort of their people that are not their supporters, and they got a lot of blowback from people that people would consider to be like a Modi supporter. Even people like myself and a lot of people sort of on the non-left have also expressed pushback against it. They're saying that this is just completely unethical. You can't just grab 5 million people. Let's just say you find 5 million undocumented, or you consider them to be illegal. What are you going to do? Are you going to just grab them and throw them into Bangladesh? Do you think Bangladesh is just sitting there with open arms? Yeah, sure. We'll take 5 million people. We can barely feed our own, but we'll take 5 million more. They're not going to take them. They don't have any need to take them. They can easily say that we have no idea if these people are Bangladeshi citizens or not. So you don't want to keep them. Bangladesh doesn't want to take them. What are you going to do? Are you just going to keep them in like detention camps for decades? No, that's inhuman. You can't do that. So, I personally, those are the reasons why I cannot support the NRC, the National Register of Citizens. I think that the current system that the BJP, the government already has systems in place, which if they can tighten those up, they can ensure better, ensuring who's legal and who's illegal better. Like you have this system called Aadhaar, which is like this national identification number. If you streamline that system better, if you make sure that illegals are not getting Aadhaar number, if you can streamline that system better, then you already have a system in place. You don't need to spend, millions and millions of dollars conducting another exercise to find out who's legal and who's illegal. Just streamline the Aadhaar system. And already the Indian government has measures in place where they've been catching people who are illegals and then deporting them back to Bangladesh. But they do it in smaller numbers. And I think if you do it in smaller numbers, it's more sustainable. You can't just grab 5 million people and throw them out of the country. Yeah. But if you deport like 100 people, sure, Bangladesh will take them. So I think the current system that you have just needs to be streamlined better, instead of doing this massive exercise and grabbing like millions of people and trying to throw them out of the country.
I think what's also concerning, what makes people kind of fear about all of this is the combination of these two acts, right? I mean, you look at the CAA, where people who come from different religious backgrounds, except Muslims from these 3 different countries, can say, well, we have been persecuted. We came from those countries, so we can stay here and we can become citizens. Whereas a Muslim who came together with those people from that persecuted country, but who cannot prove that, who doesn't have proper documentation, right, can be deported despite the fact that they came at the same time from the same country for persecution. But
exactly.
The Muslim is just a Muslim and not a Hindu, for example.
Exactly. And that's another good objection. I think that's a legitimately good objection against the NRC. So I'm in agreement with those people there completely. I don't think the NRC is a very good idea. I think there are already systems in place that you can streamline to do a better job of finding who's an illegal immigrant and, deporting them. And the government should be instead taking that money because the NRC is going to be a very expensive thing to conduct. You're thinking about a massive exercise across the entire country, billions of people. It's going to cost a massive amount of money. If you could take some of that money and just ensure it in creating a better border between Bangladesh and India, where you're making sure that less people come through. That's prevention's a better thing than cure. Always, prevention's always a better remedy than cure. So if you're spending that money that you're going to do in conducting NRC and just tightening the border better, creating better border controls, that's a much more efficient solution than something like the NRC. So I personally don't support the NRC. I personally don't like the idea of NRC, especially because of the knock-on effects that it will have. And so, yeah, I also think that I will be shocked. I'll be very surprised if the government actually does go through with the NRC. I think they were testing the waters. They said it. They wanted to see where the public was at. And then the public said, oh, no, thank you. And then the government's like, oh, yeah, we don't have any plans.
Awesome. By the way, shout out to Hindu historian here who is in the live chat and who is closely monitoring the live chat in such a heated conversation. Thanks, Hindu historian, as always. Okay, so what do you think is the likelihood of if I don't know, I don't really want to go there and want to make this kind of sound worse or dark when protests are already going around. But first question. So we see that many people who support the current government support the Citizenship Amendment Act, right?
Yes.
I mean, that's kind of the majority.
Yes.
Majority vote, the majority opinion. Is there also do most people who support the government also support the NRC, or is that rather a much more controversial and divisive?
That's a much more controversial issue. I think a lot of the people that you would see supporting the government have openly spoken up against the NRC, about saying how the NRC is not a good idea, about how it will lead to some very inhuman consequences. So, I can be very easily lumped in that group as well, as somebody that supports Narendra Modi. I'm an admirer of Narendra Modi. So for somebody like me, I've been on my channel for the past 2 or 3 months, I've been speaking out against NRC and saying why it's a terrible idea. And initially, I got a lot of pushback from people you would consider my core audience. They're like, oh, why do you hate the BJP? Why do you not support the NRC?
I see it in the live chat right now.
Right. When you start looking at some of the knock-on effects that could happen because of the NRC and some of the consequences that could happen because of the NRC, a lot of my audience has even started to shift. They've been like, you know what? Yeah, let's just stick with the CAA and let's figure out some other way where we can ensure illegal citizens. Maybe NRC is not the best way to go. So, I think even I would say in my experience and people I follow that are considered BJP supporters on social media, I've seen a lot of disagreement with the NRC among quote unquote BJP supporters as well.
Awesome. What do you think is the likelihood of the NRC being implemented?
I don't think
nationwide?
I would be very surprised if they go through with it, because they'll already India knows, already the Indian government knows that the sort of media bias against them, whether it's the sort of mainstream media in the West, whether it's mainstream media in India, the media bias against them is very strong. And on issues which majority of Indian citizens actually agree on, for example, Kashmir, on the removal of Article 370, most Indians agree on. On Citizenship Amendment Act, a very large number of Indians actually agree on. So on even those issues, they found themselves in the eye of the storm of this misinformation from media around the world. Imagine what will happen if they take a step which a majority of the people don't agree on, and even a lot of their supporters don't agree on. So they know the perils and the pitfalls of taking a step like this, not only in terms of the media scrutiny that they'll face, not only in terms of the kind of abuse that they'll face from around the world, but also in terms of politically, because their supporters might sour on them. I might sour on them if they go ahead with a move like that. And I know a lot of people that will sour on the BJP if they undertake a move like that, and if they say, yeah, we're just going to grab thousands of people and throw them in detention camps. So politically, it's going to be a very it's going to be basically shooting themselves in the foot if they go through with it.
Of course. I mean, you see how surrounding how some countries in the world, like there is a lot of media attention to China, which I find very ironic because the Muslim nations are not doing anything against it at all. They're just being totally friends with China, while China is basically persecuting Muslims.
Every time anybody asks Imran Khan, the Pakistan Prime Minister, about China, about what's happening, he's like, I haven't read up on the issue. I'm like, bro, you're like your best friend. What do you mean you haven't read up on? You're the Prime Minister. You're supposed to know this shit. What do you mean I haven't read up on this issue? I don't know. Don't ask me later. So
that would even sound dumb if I said that.
Tell me about it. Like
but we're talking about the president of India.
When they ask the question, it's like, you haven't. What do you mean you haven't read up on these? What a dumb thing to say.
God, that is awful.
Yeah.
Many other people too. I think even Erdogan, the Turkish president, was like, he completely ignores calls about that. Muslim nations, Muslim leaders completely ignore the calls about that because they see just how they need to kind of keep things good with China, so they cannot talk about that in China. Obviously,
I don't know if I had this correct. I don't know if you'll be able to answer this for me, but do the Uyghur Muslims consider themselves as having some Turkish like kind of heritage or links?
Yeah, they claim that they are related to Turks in that they are Turkic people. You know,
right, exactly.
Turkic is a very, Indians might be familiar with it. It's a very it's a racial and ethnic background that has evolved so much and traveled from Far East Asia to Anatolia. And you have Turkic nations like Turkmenistan or Kazakhstan or Pakistan, for example. And Uyghurs claim, I think, I don't know if that's a majority opinion, if that's like the unanimous or anything at all among them, but there are a lot of voices among Uyghur protesters also going on that they are Turkic or that they are Turks, that Turkic people and Turkey has an obligation to help.
Yeah, the reason I asked that is because you were saying Erdogan's ignoring it mostly, and I remember there's this really famous football player that plays for Arsenal, Mesut Ozil, and Ozil's Turkish origin. He's German, but he's Turkish origin, and he has been talking about this, and because of him talking about it, I've seen a lot of like Turks talk about it. So it's interesting that like Erdogan's still trying to like keep it under wraps.
That's kind of why Turkish conservatives and nationalists are being very angry at Erdogan and the government, because it is a very popular thing in Turkey to post on social media about the Uyghur Turks. They call them Uyghur Turks. How the Uyghur Turks are being killed and persecuted by China, but that we Muslims are not doing anything about it at all. And now the Turkish government itself is completely ignoring the situation. So it's really ironic, really.
Yeah, and you're going back to the point about like the media attention on sort of China. It's pretty sporadic when it comes to the Uyghur Muslim re-education camps, concentration camps, whatever you want to call them. The attention's been pretty sporadic. I mean, you'd think of like the sort of media storm that accompanied the whole Citizenship Amendment Act issue and the media storm that accompanied the Kashmir decision by India. I don't see that kind of a laser focus of the media on China for, one reason or another.
For many reasons, probably. Yeah. For so many reasons that, oh man.
Well, it could be that like Xinhua is spending their state-owned media agency. They're spending a lot of money in developing quote unquote partnerships with these Western media houses. Like Xinhua recently announced that they're doing some kind of a major partnership with the Associated Press. So no doubt there's some money involved there, and so you might not see a lot of noise from the Associated Press about what's going on in China.
It's funny. I see like from all those nations that actually took action against China or said something about China or made some agreements or pacts against China, are like the majority of them are Western countries.
Yeah.
There is basically no significant Muslim country among them. There, like Western nations, and obviously because there's a geopolitical thing going on between America and China, or between the West and China, while Muslims are kind of while Muslim nations are in the middle and want to keep things good with China and keep things kind of good with the West as well, which is why they don't want to speak up about it. But when it comes to Israel,
Yeah.
which many could argue, and I'm sorry, as someone who has read about it for so long, I would argue as well, where the situation is not even remotely as bad for Muslims as it is in China.
Right.
They cannot stop talking about Israel, for example,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah, and India. I mean, the kind of like stuff that you see from Middle Eastern commentators or like Islam commentators from Islamic countries saying about India, where sure there are problems between the Hindu and the Muslim communities without a doubt, but generally speaking, Muslims live in peace, and Muslims, generally speaking, have good lives in India. There's no state-backed discrimination. There's no like community-backed, widespread discrimination that you see against Muslims. Anything near that you see in China, but that doesn't stop them. That doesn't stop them at all.
Mhm, mhm. All right. I don't know if there's much more to say about the whole.
I think it's important to, if you have a little bit of time, to maybe discuss what's going on with the protests as well. Because I think the protests are a very interesting sort of highlight of this entire issue. The way people have spread misinformation, the way people have spread fear, and the way people, because you and I just had a discussion about CAA and NRC, and you and I both talked about how there are good aspects of CAA. You said that there were some aspects of CAA that you think India could improve on. Then you and I talked about how there are problems with the NRC and why we don't think it should be implemented. That's a way, in my opinion, to have a discussion about this issue. But what's happened in India, sadly, is nothing like it. It's been hysteria. It's been like insane amounts of fear mongering, and it's been like people coming out on the streets demanding justice for God knows who, when they don't even know. Like there's like so many videos of people just going up to people who are protesting and asking them, hey, what are you protesting about? And then they say CAA. All right, tell me about CAA. And they have no idea what the hell it is. Half the people protesting don't know what it is, but they've just bought into this crazy hysteria around the CAA. And they know, a lot of these liberals, quote unquote, liberals in India, they know that they have this captive audience that they can drive to violence. They have this captive Muslim population that is not necessarily very well educated, that we can scare them. We can tell them that the Hindus are coming for you, run. And we can put them out on the streets and we can drive them to violence while we sit in our, air-conditioned houses and we drink our tea, and you have the poor, uneducated Muslim out there fighting and dying on the streets. And that's been, in my opinion, one of the most shameful parts of the way people have reacted against the CAA and the NRC.
I see. So I'm dealing with my dog here. He's getting into my cables. I've seen that the protests have even been going on during the whole coronavirus outbreak thing, and it has been disrupted. I think yesterday it has been disrupted because of the corona outbreak concerns.
Yeah,
and I don't know what is your view on. I don't know if we can have a view on these things, but I see that there have been deaths, like over 60 so far in these whole protests against the act and counter protests against the protests.
Well, the violence essentially started as soon as the CAA was announced. As soon as the government announced CAA back in December, the violence started. People like to think, a lot of people have been telling everybody around the world that the CAA violence just happened in Delhi just last month, but the violence has been happening for the past 3 months. As soon as CAA was announced, there was stoning and there was like widespread, property damage and violence on the streets in Delhi by students and by random Islamists alike. And so that happened, in which a bunch of policemen got injured as well. That kind of sporadic violence has been happening pretty much nonstop since December. It happened in December, it happened in January, and it happened in February, and it finally sort of kind of came to a head in February, which coincided incidentally with Trump's visit. And it's not out of the bounds of imagination to think that this violence was perhaps planned, and again, perhaps planned to coincide with Trump's visit, because everybody knows that the entire world's eyes are going to be on India at that point, because the American president is visiting India, so it's kind of a big deal. So the whole world's media is going to be focusing on that. At that time, if you can trigger a massive spate of violence, then you can create a really great case about how India is a fascist country, and that they're just hell bent on exterminating Muslims from the country. So and that's exactly what happened. Where they've been, you have people like Bernie Sanders who are painting this violence that happened in Delhi as a Hindu pogrom against Muslims. Mm-hmm. You have people like Ilhan Omar. You have people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who are sharing articles and using the words Hindu pogrom, using the words anti-Muslim violence to paint it as some kind of a one-sided violence. Whereas if you follow the chronology of the events that took place around that in the Delhi riots, it was the Muslims that first started attacking, ransacking buildings, burning public property. A cop died. A Hindu man was dragged out of his house and beaten to death and then thrown in a drain. And then after that, the Hindu community started retaliating. And even if it's a simple Google search, anybody can do it. So I recommend people go and do it. If you just look at the list of the victims of the violence in Delhi, there's a large number of Hindus there and there's a large number of Muslims there. If this was a Hindu pogrom against Muslims, how would there be any Hindu victims at all? How would there be a large number of Hindus dying if there was some sort of a Hindu genocide against Muslims?
Yeah, I see that there was, for example, a thing enacted, a shoot at sight order, which was directed both at anti-CAA protesters and pro-CAA protesters.
Yeah, indulging in violence.
Yeah.
So for the media to paint that as as some sort of a Hindu genocide or some kind of a Hindu murder of Muslims, it's at the best extremely irresponsible, and at worst it's disgusting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I see. So we talked about that. Well, what is your advice to both sides?
Dude, I would just say, read the bloody act, read what's in them, and then express your discontent, express your displeasure with the government by protesting. Protesting is not a problem. Nobody has any problems with protesting. The problem is that under the guise of protest, under the guise of saying we're using our democratic rights, all you've been, a large part of what you've been seeing is either a violence or deeply anti-Hindu behavior. You have people, that have been talking about La ilaha illallah. That's the only thing that matters in India. And you're shouting La ilaha illallah in a country where a majority population is non-Muslim. So you're basically...
I have to say something about that. People have asked me, sorry for interrupting you.
Right.
People have been asking me about to say something about that, because there has been a discussion going on in India about whether La ilaha illallah is offensive and divisive or not, where the Muslims and their supporters, I've seen a lot of secular supporters argue that it is just a religious expression and it is not divisive and offensive at all. But the other side argues that it is deeply offensive to their religious values. And I just want to say, when a Muslim shouts La ilaha illallah in a public environment, in an interreligious, in a multicultural environment, and shouts it out in public as a political statement, that is offensive.
Right.
That is offensive. If you say that, if you go and pray in the mosque, or if you go and pray in your home, and you say La ilaha illallah as part of your acknowledgement of faith, or as part of your prayer, then you are basically doing what your religion requires of you, which is to acknowledge that there is only Allah, because that's what you believe in, and that is fine. That is your religion. That you express your religious beliefs to yourself while praying to Allah, or while being together with your Muslim community. That is okay. That's all right. But if you do that in public, if you do that in an interreligious, multicultural environment as a political statement, to say La ilaha illallah, which literally translates to there is no God but Allah, it is just, there is no discussion to have about that. It is plainly, simply hostile and offensive against other people's religious beliefs. That's why that's how the call was used in history, in historical contexts.
Right.
That's how it was used in Islamic wars, in Islamic
And
wars.
most Hindus that are objecting to it have on some occasion seen, rioters shout these slogans when they're coming for them.
Yeah.
So they don't, they say La ilaha illallah, they say Allahu Akbar when they're being attacked. So
That's a war cry.
yeah, when you see them in public shouting La ilaha illallah, then you can be forgiven for thinking that this could turn violent. Because every time it has turned violent at the cries of La ilaha illallah and Allahu Akbar. So you can excuse people for being frightened when people go in public and shout those things.
Of course, I mean, we have it everywhere. We have, I mean, let me give an example from the West, for example. In the West, we had just until a few years ago, until a year ago or two, we had continuous acts of terrorism that occurred again and again and again, in especially in England or in France, in Germany, in all those countries. Gladly, it has kind of decreased now since the terrorists have been kind of defeated and tamed in a way. But in that environment, during that environment where such stuff was happening, people would have had an extremely bad reaction if you go outside and you hear someone shout Allahu Akbar or La ilaha illallah,
Yeah.
Because the context matters. There is nothing wrong if you say Allahu Akbar or La ilaha illallah in your mosque or at your home or in your religious Muslim community while being together and praying together, or expressing how you love your belief in God. But if you are confronted with a different religious group and then you say Allahu Akbar or La ilaha illallah, that is messed up, because there is a context to Allahu Akbar too, how that came into existence. The context is that Muslims were fighting the Arab polytheists, the Meccan polytheists who believed in multiple different gods. And they used to say, Allah, Hubal is great, which is one of their gods. Hubal is great, or Allah is great, or whatever is great. And Muslims would then respond to them, say, Allahu Akbar, which means Allah is the greatest.
Right.
That means your gods are inferior. Our God is the greatest, and we will defeat you. La ilaha illallah means there is only one God, and that is Allah, and your gods will be defeated. You will be defeated. You will. You will be subdued. That's the historical context of it. Everyone knows that. Muslims themselves know that. They learned that from history.
Yeah, exactly. And so when you have people marching in the streets shouting those slogans, and then when you have these idiotic liberals, these liberal elites sort of joining in and like shouting Allahu Akbar, guys, it's just silly, because you're creating forcibly creating this animosity that does not need to exist. Another thing people are doing, which is very dangerous, is that they're almost like goading these Muslims to get out on the streets and do something crazy. Because one of the comments that I've been seeing very often, like liberals say to Muslims, is like, you stayed quiet when they took Kashmir from you. You stayed quiet when they took when they took triple talaq from you, because India recently banned triple talaq practice. So you stayed quiet when they took triple talaq from you. You stayed quiet when they took the Ram Mandir from you. And now you cannot stay quiet when they bring in CAA. So they're like, it's almost like goading the Muslims, like, go out there on the streets, go kill some people, so then we can make some noise about it. So, I'm not saying that, Muslims aren't to blame here. They are also. But I'm saying like the sort of liberal intelligentsia in India is also largely to blame for creating a situation that is bad into something that can be that basically resulted in what happened in Delhi.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. All right. If you have the time, I would like to go into a few comments and super chats. I see that excuse me. I see that Hindu historian here made a super chat, who is always here. Thanks, Hindu historian, for coming. He said, he made a nice super chat and said, I would like to see a comparison of how the CAA will affect Muslims in India with how the exodus of the Romani caused by Muslim raids affected them. I don't have the necessary historical information.
Information available at the moment either. So I'll have to look into it and answer your question a little better.
I will have to look into it too. Hindu history, and feel free to educate me on the matter if you would like to. But thank you so much for the super chat, as always. I appreciate that. Solitary Emmy made a super sticker. I find those super stickers very, very funny and very weird. It's a laughing fox cat. Whatever.
It's a laughing fox cat.
I don't know, but thank you so much, Solitary Emmy, for that. Nevitz made a super chat. Thank you so much, Nevitz, and said, "Keep up the good work, getting the truth out. Respect from Canada." Thank you so much, Nevitz. I appreciate that very, very much. United States of STD user.
That's a brilliant name.
Made a super chat and said, Sikandar Butchikhan, not Alexander the Great. He was a Turkic ruler from Swat Valley. Even his name Butchikhan means idol breaker.
Right. Yeah, he was a he ruled Kashmir as well. He was one of the rulers of Kashmir that really sort of took the whole mantle of destroying temples and breaking idols to heart, and that's why he was in fact called Butchikhan. So, is there like a question around that?
No, it's just the super chat just says that. I don't know why, but so that was a Muslim ruler of Kashmir.
Muslim ruler of Kashmir. Yeah,
I see. Well, thanks for the information, and thanks for the super chat. Solitary Emmy made another super sticker, which is a face that looks dead. Thank you. And Solitary Emmy made another super sticker, which is a unicorn.
there you go.
A unicorn with a rainbow as a tail. That is much appreciated. Thank you so much, Solitary Emmy. That's it. There are no questions. I thought there would be questions in the super chats, but anyways, thank you so much for the super chats, everybody. Okay. Yeah, I don't know if there's any more to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, if any people that watch your videos, any of your audience have any other questions, and if they let you know any questions in the future, I'll be happy to be back on and answer those questions. So
I'll be glad to have you on. I wanted to talk about I want to make some projects with you. We actually talked together in the past about how we could work out a few things together that are relevant to both you and me.
Yeah.
We have never done that, but that's because I had like major issues last year.
All good, man. Time.
What?
I said it's all good, man. Everybody needs time.
Yeah. Thank you. Just some health issues, but we could probably hopefully return to that in the future. I want to talk about how Islam historically affected India, which is something that I worked on in the past. I didn't get back to, but that I would like to get back to again in the future, since it fits into the context how Islam spreads across the world.
Right.
And I would also like to make a comparison between religions where I think it would be important to compare Islam to Hinduism, for example, where I know a lot of people will now say Hinduism is not a religion. I understand, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, but there are many Hindus. I think most Hindus treat the Hindu way of life as a religious philosophy as well.
Yeah.
I think it's fair to say.
Yeah. I do. I study religion very deeply, and I understand what people mean when they say Hinduism is not a religion, because what they mean is that Hinduism is not a religion in the context that you have it in Abrahamic faiths, for example, where you have a very clearly outlined set of beliefs and traditions, and it is very strict. That's what you hold on to. That there is one interpretation. Whereas in Hinduism, you have it is not just a set of certain very strict beliefs and rituals, and not as narrow, but rather you have a vast world of practices that you could pursue, and it also basically gives you more advice than strict rules on how to pursue life, for example. Yeah. I understand. Because I understand a little bit. I'm not. Anyway.
Yeah, and I'm not a very good authority on sort of religions, let's say, but I can have people on if we're having that discussion or I can point you to people that will be, I think, better positioned to answer specifically religious questions. I enjoy more the sort of Advaitic aspect of Hinduism, and the more sort of the yogic aspects of Hinduism is what really interests me, because I think there's genuine benefit to that, of yoga, of the Advaitin school. I think there's some very interesting aspects to that. So I focus most of my attention generally around there, and then obviously a little bit of culture, a little bit of politics. But we can always, if you want to have those discussions, I can always get people on that will be pretty well versed in that, and we can have discussions with them.
I would love to. I mean, it's not just people think I would talk with religious people about their religions while not doing the same about Islam. It's actually not a thing. I would like to, in the future, include talks about Christianity with Christians, talks about Judaism with Jews, Hinduism with Hindus, Buddhism with Buddhists, and even Islam with Muslims, if Muslims were able to sit down with me without consequences.
What reaction do you get? Do you get any like calls for people to come and talk to you about this, like Muslims?
Not really. No, I haven't had them. It's mostly just threats and stuff like that. Yeah. Anyway, well, thank you so much. I appreciate you being here, Sham, and hope to talk to you again in the future.
Sure, man. Yeah, I have to get you back on as well. It's been a while.
Yeah. You have to.
For sure.
Is there anything else you want to?
No, you promised your audience, and we've been thinking about it for a while. So we'll figure out a few projects to work on, because I think they'll be fun.
Awesome. By the way, what do you think about someone's talked about just let's keep it for another talk. We'll go on with that for half an hour if you go into philosophies and religions now.
Right.
I thank you so much for
a separate episode on that, guys.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming in. Thank you for joining me. I really enjoyed talking to you.
For sure, man. It's a pleasure as always.
Awesome. Everybody else, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for joining. Thanks for the comments. Thanks for your attention. Be well, be in peace. Hope you're having a fantastic rest of the day and a great life.
Yeah, and stay at home, wash your hands, and listen to doctors. Don't listen to anybody else. Listen to doctors. Okay?
Listen to doctors.
Media influencers are not doctors.
Yeah,
Don't listen to doctors.
I'm not an expert, obviously. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm just saying humbly, in my opinion, I would only advise to listen to experts who know what they're talking about. To just for now, don't be tough. Listen to experts. Stay at home. Don't make gatherings. You will have enough time for that in the future, just as I will. Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, everybody, and I will see you again. And stay away from Islam. Okay.